Hello everyone, we are Group 1 and today we will discuss mental imagery and correlate it to the movie Blast from the Past. The movie Blast from the Past is about Adam who grew up in a fallout shelter with his parents. I-discuss natin kung paano ang proseso ng mental imagery at visual perception ni Adam noong nakita niya na yung present world after 35 years.
Good day! We're going to discuss about the verbal imagery versus the visual imagery. But first, let's talk about what is verbal imagery. Verbal imagery is a mental image representing a word as heard, as seen, or as felt when pronounced. When people engage in the verbal task, there was activation in the prefrontal cortex near broca's area in the parietal and temporal region of the posterior cortex near Wernicke's area. In the movie, verbal imagery is shown when, after 45 years of being stuck beneath, the father climbs to the surface to observe what is happening above. Once he was aware of what happened, he returned to his family and shared what he had seen, just like the mutants he talked to, which is actually a gay. As a result, his son and wife attempt to imagine what they heard from the father.
Visual imagery, on the other hand, is about our ability to reactivate, manipulate visual representation in the absence of corresponding visual stimuli. Example dito, yung pagde-describe o sinusubukang i-describe o i-explain ng tatay ni Adam sa kanya kung ano ang baseball. So, paulit-ulit siya dun sa picture pero hindi siya naintindihan o nakuha ni Adam. So, unlike verbal imagery, visual imagery activates parental cortex, occipital cortex, temporal cortex, which are the areas that involve in visual perceptions and attention. And visual imagery is a memory technique that involves constructing mental image when learning new information in order to be able to better recall the information.
One function of visual imagery is mental rotation. It refers to the ability to imagine how an object that has been seen from one perspective would look if it were rotated in space into a new orientation and viewed from the new perspective. It usually takes place in the right cerebral hemisphere in the areas where perception also occurs. Dahil sa kakayahan ni Calvi na mag-imagine ng isang bagay na parabang nasa harap niya or 3D, ginamit niya ang mental rotation ng visual imagery para makagawa ng shelter na sakto lamang ang sukat at lalim para sa possible na object na tatama sa bahay nila.
Brain areas have two regions such as FFA and PPA. Let's first define fusiform area. Means from the temporal cortex, it responds preferentially to faces. Meanwhile, hippocampal place area, it responds to pictures of location. Additionally, stimuli refers to something that rouses or steers to action. If I am going to relate on the video, since sa loob ng 35 years ay nanirahan sila Adam, and all those years, tinuruan si Adam ng kanyang tatay o mga dapat nitong matutunan. And at this point, may knowledge naman si Adam pero hindi niya pa rin ma-express sa sarili niya dahil kulang or walang stimula na nangyayari sa brain niya.
Based sa study ni Brooks, 1968, yung perception region of the brain natin ay nagiging active at gumagana kapag ang isang tao ay nag-i-imagine or mental imagery. At si Adam, kahit na wala siyang experience of stimuli, kahit alam niyang gumagana pa rin ang perception region of the brain niya dahil nakakapag-imagine siya. For example dito, gusto niyang makakita ng babae at doon pa lang nakakapag-imagine na si Adam at nape-perceive niya ang isang image ng babae. At dahil rin, perceptual region ng ating brain nakakapag-imagine scanning din tayo. At dahil image or mental imagery ang pinag-uusapan, dito rin papasok ang image scanning.
Mental images is to scan them for critical information. Way back in the movie Blast from the Past, there was a scenario where Adam tells Eve where he lives and he recalls every detail of the underground shelter to tell Eve what his house or home looks like. The brain areas responsible for that scenario are the fusiform face area or the FFA in the temporal cortex, responses preferentially to faces, and another region of the temporal cortex, the parahippocampal place area or the PPA, which responds preferentially to pictures of locations. Using those brain areas, Adam will be able to recall and tell Eve vividly about his home.
After going out from the fallout shelter, sabi ni Calvin sa asawa niya, hindi naman daw sobrang naiba ng fallout shelter dun sa outside. Pero nag-argue naman yung asawa niya na sobrang naiba ito. Ginamit kasi nung asawa ni Calvin yung visual comparison of magnitudes. Ito yung kakayahan natin na mag-differentiate ng idea or ng object gamit yung memory natin. Ginamit nung asawa ni Calvin yung space from the fallout shelter versus the space in the outside. Kaya siya nakapag-come up na yung fallout shelter tsaka yung outside is magkaiba kahit na almost magkatulad lang naman sila na itsura.
Imagery involve both spatial and visual components because yung spatial components, natutulungan niya tayo para malaman natin yung location ng isang lugar o bagay and supported ito ng parietal area ng brain. While yung visual components naman ay may palatandaan tayo sa isang specific na lugar na yon at supported naman ito ng temporal lobe ng area ng brain. Ang isa sa example nito ay ang cognitive map kung saan alam or natatandaan natin yung pasikot-sikot ng isang place or location ng isang object. Napakita ito sa movie nung magulang ni Adam dahil alam na nila yung kabuuan ng shelter nila, lalo na at dito sila nag-grocery. Kaya alam na nila kung saan nakalagay yung isang product na need nila.
Our mental imagery, specifically in maps, have hierarchical structure from specific to general or from small regions to larger regions. In the movie, Adam was tasked to get grocery supplies outside of their shelter. This experience was totally new for Adam in his 35 years of existence. He definitely doesn't have any idea where he was heading to. Pero nung tinanong na siya ni Eve kung saan ba talaga siya nakatira, he basically cannot distinguish thoroughly kung saan ito, but only he knows that it was located inside the adult shop. This was called map distortion.
Is visual perception the same as visual imagery? The answer is yes, because in one study, the researchers found that the participants were able to recognize their composite images just as if they had been presented with them on a screen. Moving on, sa movie naman po, nakita po natin doon kung paano pinakiramdaman and tinignan ni Calvin yung nangyari sa kapaligiran nila ng asawa niya and what his heat sensor says. Through gathering the information his visual perception received, Calvin made a detailed judgment that an atomic bomb had dropped in their place and it's become very dangerous to go up to the surface. This interpretation of Calvin's was very crucial in the movie because it was the reason why they'd stay in their atomic shelter for 35 years, almost all of Adam's life.
To answer the question why does visual imagery is also visual perception are the same, it is because function in the same regions of the brain, such as the visual cortex that located in occipital lobe, because it receives and processes visual information that relay in retina. For example, dun sa mutant na sinabi ni Calvin sa wife niya, na meron na daw multisexuality yung tao ngayon. Kaya nagagets ng wife ni Calvin is because of her brain region kasi yung visual perception niya ay alam niya na yung itsura ng babae at lalaki. In the other hand naman, sa visual imagery na magkukumbine na yung itsura ng girl and boy kaya na-imagine niya na yung human as multisexual.
In conclusion, perception and imagery are two processes that overlap according to Berman. Ang perception ay kailangan ng senses, while imagery can manipulate visual representation without visual stimuli. They are alike at some degree pero magkaiba pagdating sa visual information processing. Perceiving requires low-level visual analysis dahil may details na agad ito pagka-perceive, unlike imagery na kailangan pa mag-effort ng brain to complete the visual information. This is also called high-level generation process. An example of overlapping sa movie, nakita ni Archbishop na lumabas si Calvin mula sa lupa at siya daw ay the father. That is perception, and together with mental imagery, the brain generated that what Archbishop perceived was the image of God. Dahil din dito, akala niya si Adam at yung nanay niya ay si Jesus and Mary. Visual processing requires both perception and imagery since they also function in the same region of the brain.